Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to C4C Apologetics. Have you ever looked at the claim or heard the claim that the stories of Jesus were borrowed from ancient mythology, whether mythology from Greece or Egypt or Persia or whatever the case is? Is there any validity to these arguments that the stories of Jesus were simply copied from pagan religions? We're going to be looking at that, and I hope you got your seat and your coffee, whatever drink you have, because this is a topic you don't want to miss. So really made popular by the movie, the documentary Zeitgeist, Zeitgeist gives the claim that the stories of Jesus were borrowed from 5 main figures within mythology. Now, you would think if you're going to make a case, a cumulative case as far as this is concerned, or any issue, you're going to be using your best evidences right up front, and then maybe at the end put in some additional evidences, if you will. And so according to Zeitgeist and many people out there that hold to this Christ myth theory, these are the 5, what they would say the strongest evidences of the claims of Christianity were borrowed from ancient myths and paganism. Is that the case? You got Horus, you have Attis, you have Mithra, you have Krishna, and then there at the bottom right you have Dionysus. But first, where do the ideas, the legends, the stories of these ancient pagan gods come from? Well, more often than not, these are simply brought down by oral traditions throughout the generations and the people and the civilizations. But then you have different artifacts. You have down there at the bottom, you have the contendings of Horus and Set. That's an Egyptian manuscript. You have a stele up there on the top right, again, dealing with Egypt. But then on the left, you have what's called the Mahabharata in Hinduism, and then you have the Puranas in Hinduism, and their books that actually talk about their legends and their stories, their accounts of Krishna, Vishnu, and other people as well. So where are we getting the information as far as surrounding the traditions, the legends of these pagan gods? Well, it's coming from these artifacts, relics, and many more. And so these are just an example of where this is coming from. But first, before we get into all this, really, never forget that anybody making a claim or a statement has the burden of proof to go ahead and prove their claim. So if anybody were to come to you or to come to me, someone says, hey, Jesus's stories of Jesus were borrowed from ancient pagan mythology. Instead of us trying to go on the defensive and argue how it's not the case, we need to go ahead and hold them to the fire and say, okay, you're making the claim, where is your burden of proof? How can you prove that the stories of Jesus were actually borrowed from ancient pagan mythology? And 99% of the time, you're not going to have clear answers from them because most people are just regurgitating, copying and pasting arguments. So push the burden of proof where it needs to lie, and it's on the people making the statements. Then when you're listening to these people, don't forget, like Greg Koukl in his book Tactics, the 3 main questions. 3 main questions is, what do you mean by that? All right, so someone says the stories of Jesus were borrowed from ancient pagan mythology. What do you mean by that? Allow them to elaborate in their own words to see if they really understand what they're talking about. Then say, how did you come to that conclusion? Well, I saw it on a video. Oh, I saw it on YouTube. Oh, I heard it on a podcast, whatever. Have you ever considered that maybe there's bias there? So have you ever considered, whatever the case is, that's the 3rd question. So remember these 3 questions when you're putting the burden of proof where it needs to lie. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? And have you considered fill in the blank? So just right off the bat. So let's dive right into these 5 main pagan gods that people believe stories of Jesus came from. And here we have Horus. Horus is probably the most prolific one that they use and they argue. Believed to be around 3000 BC is when this myth legend really arose in the Egyptian civilization. What is said about Horus? What is said is similar between Horus and Jesus Christ? Well, I wrote it down. So what they claim is Horus, the falcon-headed god of Egypt, is said to be born of a virgin on December 25th with a star in the east accompanying a sign of his birth, him having 3 kings visiting him to adorn him. He became a teacher at 12, baptized at 30 when he began his ministry. He had 12 disciples, was crucified. He died for 3 days and was subsequently resurrected. Now that all sounds like stories of Jesus Christ, but these people say that Horus has the same stories within the legend of Horus. And so let's look at that. So, born on December 25th of a virgin, star in the east, temple at 12, baptized at 30, 12 disciples, crucified, dead for 3 days, and resurrected. So, each one, born on December 25th. Again, like I said, most of these are oral traditions, legends, but then you have some relics, some artifacts, some manuscripts. Was Horus born on December 25th? There is zero, zip, nada, zilch, nothing. Nothing identifies the fact that Horus was born on December 25th. That is just a flat-out lie. You will not find any documents, any relics, any hieroglyphics, anything in antiquity that points to a December 25th birth date. Was Horus born of a virgin? No, he wasn't born of a virgin. So what had happened was Horus's father Osiris was killed by Osiris's brother Set. His body was cut up in many different pieces, and then his phallus, or the male part of Osiris, if you will, legend is it was cast into the Nile, eaten by a crocodile, whatever the case is. Well, Osiris's wife, Isis, ended up getting together all the body parts of Osiris through magic, putting him together, reconstructing a phallus, if you will, and then with that body and phallus of Osiris, pretty much conceived Horus. This is a completely different story, totally different from the account of really the incarnation of Jesus Christ. There is no idea in the fact that there was a virgin that conceived Horus. What about a star in the east? Again, there is zero, zilch, nothing mentioned in antiquity about three kings as far as a star in the east or anything around the birth of Horus. It's just not there. What about being a teacher at age 12? Well, again, nothing. There's nothing archaeologically, there's nothing based upon manuscripts or artifacts that talks about the childhood really chronologically of Horus. So there's nothing to find to put together and piece together whether or not Horus was a teacher at 12 years old, like the stories of Jesus talk about with him in the temple in Jerusalem. What about Horus being baptized at 30? This is actually quite interesting, and this is a play on words, if you will. Did the Egyptians baptize? Did they believe in baptism? Actually, they did. But what do you mean by baptism? Did they believe in baptism like a Christian would, as far as a symbolic action of the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ being immersed in water and then brought back up in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost? No, they do not believe in that as far as baptism is concerned. I want to read this to you. So, basically, there's an attempt to claim that this individual, this god or whatever named Anup, baptized Horus when he was 30, but there's nothing that actually talks about Anup. Many people try to say that Anup was actually Anubis that actually baptized Horus here, but we really don't get any idea of that other than maybe it's a transliteration from the Coptic text. However, then, what about the baptism? Did Anubis, if Anup was Anubis, maybe it was misspelled, whatever the case is there evidence that Anubis baptized Horus? Well, once you actually start studying baptism within ancient Egypt, you realize that baptism, like I said, is totally different from Christian baptism. Basically, Egyptians believe that Osiris, as a now god, since he died and he became a god, Osiris chooses who to baptize. And basically their idea of baptism is being drowned in the Nile River or being attacked by a crocodile and drug into the Nile River. And so anybody that drowned or was drug into the Nile, eaten by a crocodile, were said to be chosen by Osiris of being baptized, immersed in that water. The other idea of baptism that Egyptians held to was the fact of embalming. Now, Anubis, the jackal-headed god, if you will, he was the protector of the dead, and he was the one that actually embalmed people. And so with the idea of baptism was just another term used for embalming the bodies, if you will. And so was Horus baptized? well, if he was embalmed, if he was mummified, whatever the case is, yes, he would have been baptized. But again, it's not the same baptism that Christians talk about, the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ, put into the water, raised back up as a public display, if you will. So completely different from biblical baptism. Again, it's the fallacy of equivocation, using a word in a very obscure way or vague meaning to make it sound like it's the same thing. Did Horus have 12 disciples? Actually, if you were to look at ancient relics and murals, you see that Horus is believed to have four followers. These are called the sons of Horus. Outside of that, there's an idea that there was probably 6 other followers that were just temporary followers, maybe making a total of 10. Some people talk about 16 followers, and then you have 16 minus 4 equals 12, and that's how they would arrive to the 12 disciples. But according to what we have in antiquity, no, Horus did not have 12 disciples like Jesus Christ had himself. What about crucified? Was Horus crucified? So, the idea that comes from the fact that Horus was crucified is because they found a mural of Horus just standing up with his arms outstretched like that. And they said, that's a picture of the crucifixion. Well, number one, that's not really compelling evidence. But number two, if Horus was crucified, so what? I want to read you some statistics. It's reported that Emperor Augustus boasted that he had 30,000 runaway slaves and crucified them. When Spartacus led his rebellion against Rome, they were captured. Over 6,000 slaves were captured, and then they were subsequently crucified. Many people in history have been crucified. Andrew was crucified on an X. Peter was crucified upside down. Some of the other apostles were crucified. Even if Horus was crucified, so what? Doesn't really say anything. It doesn't point to anything, whatever the case is. What's quite interesting and fascinating is the idea of crucifixion that we really know of today is thought to have been brought in, if you will, by Darius I of Persian and Medes around the end of the Babylonian captivity. And there's a written record that Darius I crucified 3,000 political enemies in Babylon. That's the earliest writing we have in antiquity of crucifixion. So that's around 6th century BC. It was actually perfected by Rome, and Rome gets a lot of popularity with crucifixion until Constantine outlawed it in the 4th century AD. Again, like I said, the only reason why Horus is believed by these individuals of being crucified is because of a book that Arcaria and Murdoch wrote called The Origins of Christianity and the Quest for the Historical Jesus. Again, because of a mural where Horus is said to have his arms outstretched wide. And again, it's not factual as far as whether he was crucified or not, but even if it was, so what? Thousands upon thousands of people were crucified anyways. It would mean nothing. Was Horus dead for 3 days? Well, there's a view that Horus was dead as a child, that supposedly he died as a child, but there's no mention of how long his death was. It really looks like maybe he was brought back, right after his death, whatever the case is. There's no mention of journeying to an afterlife, whatever. The only reference really, though, that we have of a physical injury of Horus is in the Contendings of Set. Contendings of Horus and Set. Basically, this was a manuscript that you saw earlier in which Horus and Set went to the Egyptian god tribunal to argue who's supposed to have the right to the kingdom of Egypt. And basically, all the other gods wanted Horus to have it, but Ra wanted Set to have it because Horus was too young. And because of that, it led to like an 80-year war between Horus and Set. And during one of those wars, those battles, Set ended up, impaling, really just blinding Horus. And Horus lost either 1 or 2 eyes, depending on the account that you actually read. But there's nothing talking about that he was dead for 3 days. And again, resurrection, there's a legend on this Metternich stele that gives the idea that Horus was stung by a scorpion as a child. His mother pleaded and begged for revival. It goes to say that Thoth gave him a blood transfusion from Ra, and then from there the child was actually revived. But the resurrection is completely different from the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Here, Horus was a child. He died being stung by a scorpion, probably through fault of his own self. Jesus died as the perfect sacrifice lamb, voluntarily, willingly. He stayed in the tomb for 3 days and rose on that third day. Completely different. Jesus Christ rose, resurrected, never to die again in a glorified body. And then you got Horus rising again, if you will, as a child, just to simply die again later. So, completely different story and account. Also, as far as resurrection is concerned, remember, according to Egyptology, resurrection wasn't really a thing for them. The reason why there's all these gold, all these the cats guarding the tomb, the sarcophagus, whatever the case is, they have all their treasures there, is because they believed in an afterlife, and they believed that when they went to the afterlife, they could take all these possessions there with them once they were at the afterlife. Really, life here on earth was temporary to them. They were trying to get to that afterlife, and the cats were the protectors. So there was really no good, clear view as far as the resurrection. Their ultimate goal in reality really was living in the afterlife as a god. So where does all this false information come from with Horus? Well, a lot of it comes from an English poet in the 18th, 19th century by the name of Gerald Massey. And basically, he authored several books, and one of them he wrote about religions, ancient religions, talks about Egypt, and he stole a lot of ideas from Murdoch and Akaria's book, The Quest for Jesus, if you will, the historical Jesus. Basically, what is said that professional Egyptologists largely ignored his work because of the many inaccuracies found within it. His writing held such a low regard in archaeological circles that it's actually difficult to find references to him in reputable sources. Then again, you have Tom Harper's book, The Pagan Christ, where the information is clearly false in his writings, that he says that Horus was born in a cave. That's not what the actual legend goes with Horus. Horus was actually born in the delta swamps in the Nile. That Horus was tempted in the wilderness. Again, that's false. He wasn't tempted in the wilderness. He had a 80-year-long war with Set, his uncle. Then you have the idea that Horus was resurrected. There's no clear evidence apart from the child, if you will, that is any resurrection similar to that of Jesus Christ. And so the idea that Horus shares so much similarity with the stories of Jesus, number one, are fabricated and just straight up lies. But number two, it's a mention of wordplay. Baptism does not mean the same thing that a Christian believes in baptism. Completely different. Then we get to Attis. Attis around 1200 BC is where this mythology comes from, and basically the idea from Attis is that he was born on December 25th, born of a virgin, crucified, dead for 3 days, and then subsequently resurrected. So you're seeing a little similarity between these gods and what they argue as far as Jesus and the stories of Jesus. What about being born on December 25th for the Greek god Attis? There is nothing in antiquity that mentions anything about when Attis was born, according to the legend. The only reference is the fact that it was celebrated. His birth was celebrated around the time of the winter solstice, which normally fell between the 21st and the 23rd of December, not December 25th. And again, this is just a false narrative, if you will, pretty much lying, saying that Attis was born December 25th. You have no writings in antiquity or in the mythology of Attis of that happening. It just simply seems to appear in the 19th century in this Christ myth theory that we're actually talking about. What about being born of a virgin? You see, the story of Attis's birth is really quite weird. Lack of better words, is weird. So, was Attis born of a virgin? Well, if you were to go ahead and look at the account of Attis and his birth, you realize that Attis's father, Agdistis, was actually a hermaphrodite. He had male and female parts. And so the Olympian gods saw him as a threat and cut off his male part. And so his male part was cut off. It grew into an almond tree. And when the tree was fully grown, there was this earth, the daughter of a princess goddess, or a river goddess, the daughter of the river goddess, Nana. She picked up this phallus, the male part, put it against her breast, and from that, she actually conceived Attis. This is the story, this is the claim on how Attis was born. Again, it's just weird. It's a weird story. There is nothing similar to this account in the account of Jesus' incarnation in the Virgin Mary. What about him being crucified? Was Attis crucified? Well, this is simply just not true. If you were to look at the myth, there's two legends, two ideas on how Attis died. Either one, because Attis was in love with a princess, but he found out that he was actually promised over to this other prince. He got mad and he castrated himself, and he ended up dying from the self-inflicted wounds. The other story goes, the other legend is that Attis introduced the worship of another pagan goddess, which made Zeus jealous. And because of this, the area that this pagan goddess worship was instituted in Lydia, Zeus sent out a wild boar to go ahead and destroy all their crops. And in the process, one of these wild boars ended up killing Attis under the influence of Zeus. And so there's no mention, no idea of a crucifixion for Attis. He was either A, killed by a boar that Zeus sent to kill and destroy all the crops in Lydia, or B, he died from castrating himself and died from self-inflicted wounds. What about the fact that he was dead for 3 days? Was he dead for 3 days? There is nothing in antiquity. There is nothing saying that he was dead for 3 days. What about being resurrected? The only account of resurrection is from an ancient poem we have by an author by the name of Catullus that alludes to the fact of a resurrection. Now, what's interesting, and I want to look at my notes real quick, was the fact that Attis was like a god of agriculture. He was the god of vegetation. And so in ancient civilizations, the idea of a resurrection of their god of agriculture or god of vegetation or some god that has to do with the agrarian society, a resurrection wouldn't be that uncommon for them because they saw the coming of the spring, the renewal of life, the renewal of growth and harvest, if you will, and planting seeds as a resurrection, if you will. The Weeping of Tammuz is the same thing, the Babylonian idea of just the death of winter and killing off all the crops, and then the return of the sun in the springtime with the coming back of Tammuz, the Babylonian god. And so the idea of a resurrection in these civilizations is not uncommon and is really a common thing depending on what type of god they were. But again, it's completely different from the resurrection of Jesus Christ, so that doesn't even matter. Then you come to the Persian pagan god Mithra. Mithra around 1200 BC. Again, it says he was born December 25th, born of a virgin, 12 disciples, dead for 3 days, resurrected, and led to a worship on the day of Sunday. So Mithra was supposedly known by the Persians as the god of the rising sun, contracts, covenants, and actually relationships. This is who Mithra was to them. Was he born on December 25th? Again, there is nothing in history or antiquity that indicates he was born December 25th. But just like you find regularly, the celebration of Mithra, according to that civilization and culture, was around the winter solstice. Again, which was not December 25th, it was around the 21st or the 23rd of December. Was Mithra born of a virgin? Unless you consider rocks virgins, no. The story, the legend of Mithra is that he emerged out of a rock carrying either a torch or shooting an arrow in the clouds, but he was born out of a rock. And like I said, unless you think a rock is a virgin, this is complete wordplay, and no, that's completely false and fabricated. The earliest reference to actually 12 disciples comes from 18th century writings. It was actually Godfrey Higgins's writing called Anacalypsis. And so, other than that, we have nothing identifying to the fact that there were 12 disciples of Mithra. It's not documented anywhere else. Again, this just seems to be something, according to the Christ myth theory, that was added to go ahead and try to paint this idea that the stories of Jesus and Mithra were similar in nature. What about Mithra being dead for 3 days? Again, there is nothing. You will find nothing talking about he was dead for 3 days, according to their information. What about resurrection? Again, nothing as far as Mithra is concerned. What about Sunday worship? Well, basically, the Romans pretty much adopted and borrowed Mithra and really instituted Mithraism. And based upon the Romans' view of Mithraism, they did institute a Sunday worship. But what's interesting is that this Sunday worship of Mithra didn't occur in like 1200 BC. No, it occurred in the latter part of the 1st century AD, beginning of the 2nd century. after the advent of Christianity, which already, according to Acts chapter 4, established a Sunday day of worship. And so most people believe that the mythologies has stolen or even copied the Sunday worship from Christianity, not Christianity stealing it from Mithraism. So Mithra, again, most of this information is completely unfounded, and you will not find it within antiquity. So next we come to the idea that Krishna shares similarities with the stories of Jesus. And Krishna was a Hindu god in the 9th century BC, 10th century BC. It's claimed that Krishna was born of a virgin. There's a star in the east that announced his birth. He performed miracles, and he was resurrected. So, was Krishna born of a virgin? No, Krishna was not born of a virgin. See, the story goes is in Hinduism, there's the idea of dharma. Dharma is this harmonic balance in the universe with the earth and mankind, whatever the case is. And the mother goddess was very upset with the evil, wicked actions of the kings at the time. And so I'm going to read my notes so you can understand how this legend goes, because there's a little bit to it. So, being burdened with the wicked sins of the evil kings, she appeals to the creator Brahma for intervention. And Brahma turns to Vishnu, who said he would return to remove the wicked kings and restore the Dharma to the world. One of these evil kings, named Kamsa, heard a prophecy that he was going to be get destroyed. He heard this prophecy while his sister Devakinas was getting married, and that Devakinas' 8th son would be the one to destroy him. Therefore, he imprisoned Devakinas and her husband and killed their first 7 children. Vishnu then appeared to the imprisoned couple and told them that he had come in disguise of their next baby to save them. Once born, Vishnu miraculously freed them in the incarnation of Krishna, if you will, freed them from the prison where they went to this area. They actually stolen somebody else's baby, infant, and left Krishna there. Then they ended up going back to the prison. When Kamsa came back to the prison, he took that child, thinking it was actually Krishna, and killed her. So, the mere fact that this was the 8th child that Krishna's mother and father would have points to the fact that, guess what? She wasn't a virgin. She was not a virgin. Pretty much Krishna was simply the incarnation of Vishnu, and that's more or less what their gods are. Whenever the Dharma forces get out of balance, that Vishnu comes back and he uses these as avatars. But again, Krishna was not born of a virgin. He was actually the 7th child or 8th child born within his family. Was there a star in the east? The only reference to a star in the east comes again from 19th century poet James Allen. He wrote the poem Star of Wisdom. He references a star that told the birth of Krishna. Then in the 19th century, there's a Quaker by the name of Kersey Graves. He has a book called 346 Similarities Between Christ and Krishna, and he mentions the fact that there was this star. Outside of those 2 records, those 2 writings, 18th and 19th century writings, there is no writings, nothing, whether in the Mahabharata, whether it was in the Purana, or any of the other Hindu writings about this star announcing the birth of Krishna. Completely fabricated. It's not in the epics, the poems, or anything else. It is certainly not the same star as the star of Jesus, the star of Bethlehem. Did Krishna perform miracles? Well, the only miracle really that's recorded is the fact that the miraculous escape from the prison by Krishna, who was actually the avatar for Vishnu. But it doesn't matter. So what? These ancient civilizations, to make their gods look great, they create these stories, these great feats of strength, these tales, if you will, that they completed these miracles. So it's not surprising that you hear the fact that some of these gods perform certain miracles. It doesn't mean anything. But what is interesting is the fact that Muhammad never did any miracles, but the Quran does say that Jesus performed miracles. That's interesting. So you got miracles and you got resurrection. Was Krishna resurrected? Well, the death of Krishna happened because at the end of his life, if you will, he was in the woods, in the forest, and there was a hunter by the name of Jara who mistaken Krishna's foot for a deer, don't ask me how, and shoots his foot. And somehow Krishna dies from that shot. It was a mortal wound, shooting him in the foot. I have no idea. Maybe it's like his Achilles' heel in Troy, but that's how he dies. Basically, that death was supposedly prophesied by a curse that a woman put upon Krishna, because during the wars that she blamed Krishna for the death of her family. She cursed Krishna. Ergo, he gets shot by Jara in the woods, in the foot, and he dies from that. But there is nothing that is told that he was resurrected and came back to life. Matter of fact, after his death, he left this mortal world, and it ushered in what's called the Kali Yuga, or the next Dharmic age. Because remember, the whole reason of Krishna's birth was supposedly to restore the Dharma from the evil, wicked kings. So, no resurrection. The last one that's mentioned is Dionysus. Dionysus is believed to have been the god of wine according to Greek culture, and basically this was around the 6th century BC. It said that, again, he was born December 25th, born of a virgin. He did miracles to include turning water into wine. He was called King of Kings and Alpha and Omega. Is there any substantiation to any of these claims? Like we saw pretty much none of them for any of the others. Was he born December 25th? No. Yet again, we find no evidence that the myths or the legends, the traditions point to the fact that he was born on December 25th. All we ever find is that these civilizations and cultures celebrated during the winter solstice, which again was December 21st through the 23rd, not on December 25th. Again, it's completely unfounded. Was Dionysus born of a virgin? Matter of fact, the birth of Dionysus was quite interesting. Again, it's similar to the birth of Attis. It's just weird, if you will. So Dionysus is believed to have been conceived by a mortal woman by the name of, I'm going to call her Semele, Semele. He was born to a mortal woman named Semele. Basically, the story goes that Semele was the princess of Thebes, and as Zeus liked her, hid his godhood from her. They ended up having a baby named Dionysus. Well, Zeus's wife Hera is very jealous of this, and she convinces and tricks Zeus to reveal his full identity to Semele. Well, because Semele was a mortal person, she couldn't look on the fullness of God, and therefore when Zeus revealed himself, he ended up killing Semele by her looking at him. Before the baby Dionysus died, because he was in the womb, Zeus takes him out of the womb and sews Dionysus into Zeus's thigh. And from Zeus's thigh, he was actually born. That is pretty much the main legend as far as how was Dionysus born. The other legend is the fact that Zeus had relations with his daughter, and he was born with his daughter. And so either account, neither one of them is a virgin. Clearly not the virgin story of Jesus Christ. Again, it's just complete fabricated. Did Dionysus go ahead and turn water into wine? Dionysus being the god of wine, he was the god of really debauchery and just drinking and partying and whatever the case is that the case? Well, the only idea we get of this aspect of wine is in the 3rd century BC. Pausanias is writing the description of Greece, mentions that there is a legend or a story that says there were empty barrels that were sealed. And then pretty much to make a long story short, those empty barrels on the next day, even though they were sealed, turned into wine. There was wine filling it. It was not a water into wine. It was an empty barrel of nothing turned into wine. Completely different from the stories of Jesus. But again, with their gods, so what? Big deal. They're ascribing miracles to these pagan gods. You would expect that to be the case. So it also talks about him not necessarily doing miracles, but going around villages and towns teaching them how to actually make wine. Was he called King of Kings? Was he called Alpha and Omega? Now this is interesting. First, Dionysus, according to legend, was considered an outsider to the Olympians because he was mortal born, if you take the idea that he was born of the princess of Thebes. He wasn't originally one of the original 12 Olympians, but he was later added, years later, hundreds of years later, replacing Hestia as one of the 12 Olympians, but he was an outsider to those Olympian gods. Anyone familiar with the Greek mythology realizes that pretty much Zeus and Hades are the top gods according to Greek mythology. So for the fact of Dionysus being called King of Kings doesn't fly with what everybody knows about Greek mythology. According to them, their King of Kings was Zeus. But even still, you find this reference of King of Kings in the Deva inscription that talks about Xerxes, the Persian ruler or king, if you will. It was a common self-ascribed title to mortals, to kings, to call themselves King of Kings, and we see this in the Deva inscription. So that's not that big of a deal. It says, I am Xerxes, the great king, King of Kings, King of countries containing many of men, King of this earth far and wide. So, but then when you look at where are these references coming from, is there a mention of Dionysus being called King of Kings or Alpha and Omega? There's nothing that anybody can pull up that shows clear as day in inscriptions that are close to the 5th century BC that says Dionysus was King of Kings and Alpha and Omega. And again, anybody that is familiar with Greek mythology knows that would be an affront to Zeus and actually to Hades as well. So whether from Horus, Attis, you have Mithra, you have Krishna, you have Dionysus, you see that 95% of the information that's being said, December 25th, born of a virgin, star in the east, whatever the case is complete lies. It's lies, it's unfounded, unsubstantiated. You find nothing in antiquity. The other areas like Horus being baptized, being born of a virgin rock, things like that, it's all wordplay. They're just using ambiguous, vague words and terms. Even though it meant one thing in Egypt, it's something completely different in Christianity. And so they're completely unfounded, unsubstantiated. They're based upon lies and falsehoods. But I want to, let's say, for instance, say all of those were true. Say that, Horus and Attis and Mithra, December 21st, let's say, resurrected, blah, 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 all the other things. It doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily prove that Jesus, the stories of Jesus, were borrowed from pagan mythology. It doesn't. That is actually a fallacy. It's called the post hoc fallacy. It's called the actual fallacy of correlation, saying that because A is older than B, that A caused B. Because Egypt is older than, you say, Judaism or Christianity, not Judaism, but Christianity, that Egyptian culture influenced Christianity. That's the post hoc fallacy. That's a fallacy of correlation. It doesn't prove anything. For instance, who are you thinking of when I read this, or what are you thinking of? About 100 years ago, an ocean liner set off on her maiden voyage. This ocean liner was called Unsinkable. It left Europe to cross the Atlantic. This ship hit an iceberg and began to sink in the month of April. More than half of the people on board died because there were not enough lifeboats. What boat am I talking about? Is it the Titanic? Wrong. It was not the Titanic. Did you know 14 years before the Titanic actually sank, there was a novel written in 1898 called The Wreck of the Titan, Futility, if you will. This is a novel that was written that has the same details of the Titanic, but was written 14 years before the Titanic actually sank. Would anybody dare say that the story of Titanic was borrowed from this book? No. Even still, we have survivors, we have eyewitnesses. Would we say that the writing of the novel influenced the sinking of the Titanic? No, we wouldn't say that as well. This is interesting. This is fascinating. This points to the fact that just because A is older than B, it doesn't mean that A caused B, the post hoc fallacy, the correlation fallacy. And this is something that I just found out recently, and it was quite fascinating to see. So, the idea of Jesus, the stories of Jesus being borrowed and stolen from pagan mythology is just unsubstantiated, unfounded, mostly based upon lies and wordplay. Just realize a couple things. Number one, articulation. Anybody that can do well speaking, if anybody is a great public speaker, great persuasion, they can get anybody to make anything sound believable. Just check out 119 Ministries. They sound really good, really articulate, really legitimate, but it's all falsehood that they're teaching from Scripture. And so if you can speak well, you can probably get a lot of people to believe what you're saying, even if it's complete lies. And then how does truth evolve in the secular world? Well, it was said that a lie told once is still a lie, but a lie told 1,000 times becomes truth. And so people start buying this idea that, yes, it's true because the oral tradition continues going. This lie was promulgated for about 100, 200 years, and more people are accepting it. But we're told by God, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit after the tradition of men and not after Christ. And we're told elsewhere that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. And so some of these people can speak very well. They're great public speakers. And because of that, they can make very compelling arguments. But once you do your own research, you find out the arguments, they fall flat. Where did all this originate from? Well, the Christ myth theory, the idea that the stories of Jesus were borrowed from pagan religions, really stemmed from a couple people from the French Revolution. You see there Charles Francis Dupuis and Constantine de Volney. They were philosophers back in the 18th century that pretty much established this idea that Jesus Christ, the stories were borrowed from pagan myths. And then you have Gerald Massey and his English poems that he written, and then the historical writings that he made as far as Egypt, if you will, which were completely unfounded, unsubstantiated, and professional scholars reject them. It was popularized today by Kersey Graves, Akaria Murdoch, and Tom Harper in their books and other books like it by trying to make money off this idea that the stories of Jesus were stolen from pagan mythology. This is based upon, if you're familiar with Stephen Bancarz, he's the Christian that came out of the New Age occult movement. Basically, he has a great article out there that talks about reasons why professional scholars reject the Christ myth theory. I have a link there at the bottom. Go ahead and check it out. It's fascinating. And he has references and cites what these scholars say, why they reject this idea. But here's a few of them that I pull out. According to why the Christ myth theory was rejected or is rejected is because, number one, most of what is known about secret pagan religions comes after the advent of Christianity. Like I said, most of these are coming from books written in the 17th, 18th, 19th century. Information about Jesus can be verified historically. Pagan stories, mythologies cannot. There is evidence of complete lies and dishonesty in Murdoch and Akaria's work and other writings as well. Jesus' resurrection is completely unique, completely different, and was life-changing to the historical apostles. We only have fabrications. We only have these stories and ideas of a resurrection in pagan gods based upon the cyclic nature of nature. And then finally, professional scholars unanimously reject the notion that Jesus is a pagan copy. So, is Jesus a pagan copy? No, Jesus is not a pagan copy. The stories of Jesus were clearly articulated and written in the Bible. The Bible, you can test it. You can look at evidence, whether it's reliable eyewitness testimony, accounts, verifiable information, embarrassing details, the fact that women found the empty tomb, all these other things you can test to see if it's reliable. And so we have historical evidence of the stories of Jesus. And then again, the stories of Jesus were not borrowed from pagan mythology because when you look at the actual pagan mythology and legends, completely different from the stories of Jesus once you actually look at it and stop just listening to what these people are saying. So, list of my resources that I pulled a lot of this information. This isn't all inclusive because there are some other areas, but there was a lot of study and research that went into this. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know in the comments what you think below, but just help me argue against the fact that Jesus was not a pagan copy. But remember, anybody making that claim that Jesus was borrowed from ancient mythology, remember the three questions. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? And have you considered fill in the blank? Whoever makes that claim has the burden of proof to actually prove that claim, that statement. And you'll find out more often than not that these people are regurgitating, copying, pasting arguments, and they don't know what they believe or why they believe it. So help them know the truth. So thanks for checking out C4C Apologetics. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, blah, 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 blah. And then until next time, God bless.